Hey, it's Elizabeth D'Alto, and this is the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untame the Wild Soul is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. What's up, wild ones? Welcome to episode number 213 of the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth D'Alto, and in today's episode, we are talking about making sense and meaning out of life with my good friend, Jade Teta. I love this interview so much. It was part catch-up, part exploration, part jam session with a person who I just love and appreciate so much. The common threads throughout each topic we covered were making sense and meaning out of ourselves, out of life, and of the world. Jade shared why he hates the term vulnerability for men and what he finds helpful instead. We talked about openness, flexibility, and perspectives on spirituality and power. He also shared some sage advice he received from his mom during a time of great suffering in his life, how he constructed his personal honor code, and the importance of creating a legacy. It was so good. You might want to listen to this one more than once. The show notes can be located at untameyourself.com/episode-213. And if you're listening here in real time, I have some free workshops to invite you to this week. I'm super excited about this. Instead of recording these, I'm just offering different times on different days so more people have a chance to tune in live because it is a for real workshop. We're going to be doing some exercises, working through some stuff real time on the call. They're going to be super productive, super enlightening, and really expansive. So I'm excited to spend that time with you. To see what we're covering in the workshop, you can head over to wildsoulmovement.com/U as in un, C as in consume, Y as in yourself workshops. So you can check out the different times. You can register for more than one if you'd like to, and they're going to be really awesome. So check that out. And now for the show. Jade Teta, welcome to the Untame the Wild Soul podcast.
Elizabeth D'Alto, my favorite. How are you? I love you.
I'm so good. I'm so glad you're here. So people listening, you have actually heard me reference Jade on the podcast and probably in blog posts before, because there's a story I share about 2 breakups ago, back in 2013, and you're the original one I credit with putting me on to Byron Katie's work.
Oh, interesting. And Jill put me on Byron Katie's work.
Yeah. And so, you know, for anyone listening who has heard me mention Byron Katie before, I talk about her in my book, especially her book, I Need Your Love, Is It True? That's the one you told me about. And I remember I was in my car, my first red Mini Cooper in Laguna Beach. Like, I had to literally pull over. I was listening to it on Audible. I had to pull over because I was crying so hard. I'm like, this is dangerous. I can't drive right now.
Yeah, it can shake you up too. And different people have different reactions because some people, they start crying. Other people are like kicking and screaming and pissed off because It's like, it's so earth shaking, that concept, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And then recently we were at a Byron Katie thing in LA and it wasn't really resonating the same way as it used to, but
yeah,
I guess that's just how it all, you know, we grow in and we grow out of things. So first question I love to ask our dudes, which you're the first dude we've had on the show in a while. What are you loving about being a man right now?
Oh, you know, it's funny. Everyone's talking about like, oh, men are having such a hard time, this and that. And I don't think that at all. I mean, I really am. I love the idea. And I know this is, you know, I really feel like this, and Elizabeth knows this about me. So this isn't just, I really feel like as a man taking a step back is a good thing. And like, you know, watching and observing and learning and understanding how to have different conversations around sexism and racism and all these things that white men are need to stop talking and listen. Mm-hmm. I'm actually enjoying that. I'm enjoying the education around that because I'll be honest, as someone who considers himself a feminist and someone who, you know, sort of feels like he speaks the language, I'm learning things that I'm like, you know what? Even someone like me who's like been steeped in this for a while, I have to be careful about that. And that's important. And So I actually am enjoying that process where I think like everyone else who's a man is like, they're kind of like, man, it feels on shaky ground. I don't feel that way at all. I feel like the world's getting better, so I like that.
And obviously like statements like everyone else, they're sweeping generalizations. You're not actually saying I'm the only person doing this and nobody else is doing it. Exactly. We know that when we hear you, but that I appreciate that. That's actually one of my favorite things about you, like always geeking out, always learning, always exploring. And so you're enjoying that education right now. Does anything feel specifically challenging about being a man right now, or just in terms of being a human?
Yeah, I'll tell you this. To me, I love Brene Brown stuff. Love all her work. I cannot stand the word vulnerability for men. So I'll just come out and say that. And I think, I went to Lewis Howes' event recently. He just released a book, The Mask of Masculinity. I just finished that book, and there's one thing that grates on me a little bit. It's the idea of vulnerability for men, because what I hear from women, and you women can, either just yell and scream at me and kick and scream or say you agree or not, but I'm just going to be honest. What I hear from women is two things. They want a man who can go there emotionally, and they also want a strong, real man. I hear these two things over and over again. I want a vulnerable man. I want a man who talks about his feelings. I want these things. And then also, I just want a dude who will shut the hell up and get to work and get his job done, too. And those two things can be very confusing for a man, especially when we talk about vulnerability. So I really see it as on a spectrum. I see it as like closed off over here, right? And I see sort of victim on the other side, right? Where it's just like I'm the arrogant man on one side and I'm sort of the victim on the other side. And then there's sort of gray in the middle. And I see open as being, emotionally open as being the bell-shaped top of that curve, where I see vulnerability sort of tipping into the victim mentality a little bit. Men need to know how to be vulnerable without going victim mode, because I think that's not something that serves a man at all. I don't think it serves a woman either. But I think vulnerability to me, just from a semantics point of view, men don't like that term. I think we see it as weakness, even though I think Brene Brown has done an amazing job showing that it's not. A man hears vulnerability, they hear weakness. So I prefer emotionally available, emotionally open, be an open man. And the way I handle that, by the way, and, I'd be interested in your take on this, so I can kind of learn just from a different perspective. But for me, I look at it like this. If I'm dating you and we're dating and you come home and you say, babe, how was work? What's going on? Then I'm emotionally available and open to say, you know what? My boss is sort of driving me a little bit nuts. I'm a little bit overwhelmed and frustrated by this, and this. That's to me being emotionally open and available, if you ask. But I'm not going to come home, sit down and be like, babe, you wouldn't believe about my day today. This happened, that happened. I can't stand my boss. This is going on. I'm so overwhelmed. So I'm available to have that conversation with you, but I'm not, my natural default, man is going to just be like, yeah, it's good. Got my job done. Now it's on to something else. Let's cuddle up. Let's watch a movie. Let's drink some wine. Let's talk about other things. I don't want to vent to you. Or if I really need to talk and I'm just feeling like I got to talk to somebody, you're my girl. I'm going to certainly be like, babe, I got something on my mind. You have some space to, let me vent for a minute. And that's, again, an open man. But being vulnerable to me is like I'm always spewing emotional stuff. And I don't know that I need to do that. That to me, that seems like what you girls get from your girlfriends. I'm not so sure. And maybe you can tell me. I'm not so sure you would want that from your man all the time. You want it when you want it, but you don't want him being your girlfriend constantly.
Right.
Hey, what's wrong? Hey, this is what's wrong with me. Hey, let's talk about our feelings. Hey, I love that stuff. I don't want to do it 24/7.
Yeah. So it's hilarious because, there's so many distinctions here, right? And I can only speak from my own perspective. Are there women out there who might want a lot of that and have high capacity for it? Maybe. Are there women who probably never want to hear it or see it? It's a huge turnoff for them. Sure. I love that you said everything exists on a spectrum, right? For me personally, based on previous experiences. So 2 relationships ago, I was with someone who really had an aversion to talking about feelings. And in fact, would tease me for needing or wanting to talk about my feelings. And what I didn't realize at the time, I was still kind of steeped in oh, your partner is your everything, was how healthy and important it is to have other outlets. So you're not bringing everything to your partner all the time, because I don't actually think it's healthy in any instance, whether you think you want it or not, to rely on one person for everything, whether or not they have the capacity for it. I just don't think that's a healthy relationship that leans itself towards codependency.
Agreed.
And so very healthy, and especially to also have professional people to talk to, because your friends aren't necessarily going to give you like qualified, solid, good reflections all the time, right? Yeah. And everyone has so many opinions. And if your opinion is strong, sometimes it's offered in such a way that might be so convicted that it feels like truth. But it's a truth, but it's not the truth. So we have to be really careful, right? And when we are feeling vulnerable, whether you're a man or a woman, how we receive that stuff, something coming from a position of strength when we are not feeling strong, we are tender, we are vulnerable, and we are a little more malleable in those cases, I think, right? So
I love that, yeah.
That's my perspective on that. And then for me personally, and then my last relationship, I was with someone who was like, all about sharing like all the feelings, processing all the time. And it was exhausting. I don't think it's wrong. It's just, I realized for me, I have a high capacity for that, but I hold a lot of space for a lot of people in my work. Yeah. So at the end of the day, I want to be like nourished. I want to have fun. I want to be able to talk about other interesting things and do fun stuff. I don't want to go from like processing with clients and people in my groups and stuff to like having to process in my relationship every freaking day, right? Like, when do we get a rest? Like, that's a muscle, like just fatigued. It's like overtraining my emotional muscles.
And you know what's interesting about that too, and you know, see what your listeners think about this and what you think about this. I like emotionally open better because it allows you to go either direction. If I'm in a relationship with you and you want a more vulnerable man, then I'm emotionally open and I can go there. But if I'm a vulnerable man, I can't really go the other direction. That to me feels like I'm stuck in that one position where I just feel like when within a partner, the communication is, I need you to be X, Y, Z, and I can float a little bit within that. I mean, I have boundaries where I'm going to not go or go, but to me, being emotionally open means I can have a conversation with you and essentially be like, oh, you know, Elizabeth needs this from me. And so I can make that move a little bit down the spectrum versus being stuck in vulnerability, sensitivity, or being stuck in arrogance, closed off, know-it-all. Yeah. And so I like the idea of being open and available to move along that spectrum.
And there's some agility and there's some flexibility in what you're describing. That's awesome. And I also appreciate, and I think it's a real reflection of like the work that you've done on yourself, even how you phrased it earlier when you were like, hey, I have something going on. Do you have some space for this? Even checking, right? Because I've had experiences where a partner would come to me and not ask, and then it feels more like a dumping. And then because I didn't have the capacity in that moment for whatever reason, I would be like shame blamed or passive aggressively written about on the internet.
Yeah. Which all of us people who are on the internet have had that happen.
Right. When it's like, women say they want it all, but they can't handle it. It's like, well, no, I was just actually a little taxed that day. So...
Yeah. And it goes back to your point about, hey, we can't be, especially in romantic relationships, we can't be everything to our partners. And I would say same with just friends. We can't have one friend that is everything. I actually describe this as social MVPs, like social most valuable players. I have a financial person I go and talk to, my father, but I won't go and talk to my father about, sort of the deeper stuff. I go to him about business, financial stuff. I go to my mom about, sort of spiritual stuff. I go to my brother when I need to sort of bro out. I go to my friend Ronnie, who's just a straight up.
I've met Ronnie.
Yeah, you met Ronnie, right? Just straight up fight anybody. You're like, we have to go kill someone, Ronnie, right now. He's like, I got you, Jade. Like, so we have different people that we go to, but I'm not going to have an intellectual conversation with Ronnie. Right. I'm just going to be like, Ronnie, there's a guy who's giving me problems. We need to go kill him. He's like, point him out. We'll get him. It's like,
get him, bro.
So you have different people. And I think it's important that if you find yourself in a situation where you're like, I need some laughter and joy in my life.
Yes.
I need to go find, and I don't currently have that person. It's your responsibility to go find that person and bring them into your team. Like you're a recruiter trying to build the best
100%.
social team.
Yeah. This is something really in the last like year and some change since I came out of my last relationship. I really like zoomed out and took some stock of my friendships. Like, who do I have in my life? Who have I lost touch with that I'd love to reconnect with? And same, like those different like categories. I love this idea of social MVP. And what I realized, what I was really lacking was the interaction around just like humor and funny stuff and people who you could like be sarcastic with, take some jabs, but it's like, it's super innocent. It's not offensive. And it's not like acting out any wounds or anything. Like you're literally just joking and it's okay. Like you can say some funny stuff. Yeah, and it was like I had those people in my life. I just wasn't having the level of interaction with them that I desired. And then it's just a matter of being like, hey, I miss your face. Like, let's chat, let's connect, let's catch up.
And by the way, along those lines, right, like you and I reconnecting, because we were kind of, we were both doing our own thing for a while. I was going through my stuff, you were going through your stuff. And now I love talking about joy. I'll get from Elizabeth, I'll get like this, I'll get a DM of a crazy gym meme that's going on to laugh my ass off.
Yeah.
And I love that, right? It's like you need those kind of people. They're small little things, but they make a difference. And so I always talk to people. I'm like, if you're missing that, you need to realize you can't, and you're not getting that from your partner and you've had the conversation and they're just not that. Sometimes you can, if they're emotionally open, you can coach them along and you can be that. But I think it's a mistake, especially I would say for men, because, you were talking about what's challenging about being a man. I think that is challenging. Whereas you women have always had sort of each other's back in social circles, dudes typically not. And so you have to go and search for those sort of next level guys, a lot of them who aren't just about, beers and ball games, you know what I mean? And that's been tough for me. It's like the beer and ball game guys. I love them. I'll go hang with them. That's the Ronnie type, but I also need sort of the bookworm dudes and the intelligent guys and the guys who will have a real combo with me.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, that's actually not true. It wasn't really my experience, but what I have come across in my communities is a shocking amount of women who don't trust other women because their experience has been that women are catty and women are competitive with each other. And that's really, it's a function of like the overall culture, which is competitive, which is saying like there's not more than enough to go around. If this person is winning, this person is losing, or if this person is getting more, that means it's taking away from someone else. So I think that mentality reaches across, like that crosses genders. I don't think that's really
important. Very important for me to hear. Very important for me to hear, because I tend to just assume that women are like they have their group of girls. But yeah, that's really interesting that there's plenty of women out there who are sort of feeling very lonely like a lot of guys do.
And it's probably because you probably have women in your life who have that healthy, group of girlfriends and have those relationships. So it's again, it was a little shocking to me as well, because that was not really my experience either. Yeah. So in terms of the next level human stuff that you're talking about right now, I love, and here's what's cool that I appreciate about you. I do not agree with everything that you share, and I know you don't agree with all my stuff too.
Which is why we have such a cool relationship, because we've always been relatively cool with that.
Yeah, and like I can respect it though. I respect anyone that's like, this is what I stand for, this is what I believe, and I'm flexible. Like I've also watched your beliefs change and expand over time. So I'm super curious. You mentioned that you'll go to your mom for spiritual stuff. In your context, Jade Teta, what qualifies as air quote spiritual stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's interesting. I don't those, and I think this is what Elizabeth's getting at. Like, I don't believe in God in the traditional sense at all, and I don't really believe in universe either. I don't think that spirituality necessarily means it has to be this sort of out there. To me, spirituality is an inner experience. You can get it. I feel it after I work out. Sometimes I feel it when I'm on a hike. Sometimes I feel it, during pillow talk with my lover. I feel spirit in different ways. And all that means to me is something outside of myself that helps me transcend to something that's a little more beautiful and unknown and mysterious. Yeah. And so I don't necessarily make that mean anything. Could be God, could be, I don't know. I'm purely agnostic in that. But when I go to my mother, it's to make sense of these outside experiences, right? It's to make sense of, Mom, I'm having this, sort of crisis where, my story, and I was in love with two women at the same time. You know, I was struggling mightily through this and going through a separation and I would call it a betrayal sandwich. And my mom was who I leaned on during that time to make sense of these transcendent, mysterious sort of powers and lessons that can kind of overwhelm you if you're not solid, almost like you're sort of, in the ocean without a life vest, sort of bouncing around. And I would ask her, and actually, my mom, I took a drive across country with her during this whole process, and I asked her, and this would be to me a spiritual truth that she gave me. I said, Mom, when you're going through stuff like this, if you just had to say, like, what would you say to someone? Forget it's your son. What would you say to somebody who's dealing with the hardest things in life? And she looked at me and she said, honey, honey, I think you just got to take a lot of long walks and just do your job. And to me, I don't know what that was, but to me, it was just to basically say that you just stay present, you just keep moving, and you do what you're on the planet to do. And those lessons they come to you. There's, I don't know, have you ever read Rilke's work, Rilke?
Here and there, some
Letters
epic
to a Young
stuff.
Poet.
Yeah.
So he has a saying that I have on my bathroom. I'll see if I can get it right, and it's I think it's just beautiful. But it says, "One day, in the distant future, without your fully being aware, you will live your way into the answer." And I think that that's sort of what my mom was, sort of saying to me, and then basically giving actually a pretty, I think, powerful blueprint to how to weather that time. So, I think that that's what I mean when I think of the spiritual stuff. To me, the spiritual stuff is the stuff that is transcendent, and not just transcendent in that this feels blissful, but transcendent in this is some serious suffering. And both of those are filled with lessons and mysteries beyond what we're fully capable of knowing. So to me, it's like, you know what you know, right? This is a landmark form education. You know what you know what you don't know.
Yeah.
But then there's all the things that you don't know. And to me, the spiritual realm is partly entertains that region. And to me, so that's how when I go for spiritual help, and even like if I went to talk to you or Jill or some of my close friends and I needed that kind of guidance, what I'm looking for is just the way you make sense of it. And I love, to me, when I see some of the stuff you do, which, to me, I think you and I both know, like that kind of stuff, like Wild Soul, right? Like to me, it is a little bit wild and it's crazy, but I go like this. I don't judge it because I go, what a cool way of making sense of the mystery of life.
Yeah.
And of celebrating in a sense. And I have my own way, philosophy, fitness, different ways. And we all have to, I think, find those things. I would say anything that's powerful to us that we incorporate into our life in that way is spiritual. To me, lifting 400 pounds on my back, squatting, is a spiritual, I don't do it to try to get to look good. To me, that's absolutely asinine. That I'm going to work out now to look good for vanity's sake. I do it because it helps me transcend my own little egotistical, arrogant, small world.
Yeah. I love it so much because it's just such a great example how, everything has a spirit. So I don't care what people call it. And I especially like your focus on making sense of things because the brain wants to do that. And I think something we talk about a lot in the wild soul world is surrender, because some things are never going to make sense. And that could lead to suffering, trying to make sense of things that aren't actually meant to make sense. Specifically things like tragedy, trauma, catastrophes, these things that, nonsensical is one of the only ways to describe them. So to me, that becomes a situation of what is the best way I can respond to this that's going to be the most useful, the most healing, the most transformative to me or other people in my life.
Yeah, it makes me think, I'd be interested in your thought on this. There's a saying, everything happens for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And many people love that saying. I personally cannot stand it. I hate it. I hate it. And here's why, because it goes to what you just talked about. To me, there are some things you will never make sense of. they have no sense, right? So everything happens for a reason means that somebody, somewhere, something has a reason for it. God made it happen, or universe made it happen. To me, I think life happens and then we get to happen back. And I think that is ultimately, to me, I think everything happens and then you make a reason.
Yeah.
Right. So for, like Viktor Frankl, I don't know if any of you have read Man's Search for Meaning, but to me, it's a tough read. It's one of the most important reads of my life. And I think there's a reason why it's such a powerful book. But, here's a guy who went through 4 concentration camps in the Holocaust, lost his life work. He happened to be a psychologist as well, lost his PhD dissertation. They took it from him on arrival, lost his wife, lost all of his family, except his sister, but survived. And the whole point was that out of that, he decided to create meaning out of it, which resulted in this book, which resulted in hundreds of millions of people now having been impacted by that work, whether they've read it or not. And so everything happens, you make the reason, versus to me, everything happens for a reason. Because if everything happens for a reason, then you're suffering because you're trying to figure out what that reason is instead of realizing that it's on you to create the reason. Life happens, you get to happen back. That's how I make sense of it, though, right? And that's the difference, whether or not that resonates with you or not. A lot of what I think you and I do, Elizabeth, is a lot of what we do in our coaching is we say, I'm not really attached that you see it my way, but I do go, try this on. Here's how I've made sense of it. And I always enjoy other people saying, hey, here's how I have made sense of it. Because oftentimes I go, wow, that actually resonates more to me than the way I made sense of it. I think I'll pull from that.
And that comes also from openness in general, not even emotional openness, but maybe this is intellectual openness, or just like having an open mind, having an open heart, being available to learn and pivot and expand your viewpoints and your perspectives. So I was having a conversation, and I feel like a lot of what we're talking about right now, some of it, people could be listening to this and going, it's just a lot of semantics. Yes, and what this does is it fuels our purpose. It fuels how we move through the world, how we react and respond to people and life and situations and what's happening.
Yep.
And so it's useful. To me, that's one of my biggest things, usefulness. Is it useful or is it not useful? Is it getting me closer to where I want to be or further away? Is it helpful to me or others, or is it not? And if it's not, then it's a distraction, then it's unhealthy, then it's not helpful. But if it is, like, I'm game. So yesterday I was chatting with my friend Monisha, who I have to have on the podcast. She's amazing, amazing human. And we were having kind of one of these similar conversations, the semantics around the term longing. And for me, I was like, I like the idea. I feel like your desires that are actually like the desires of your soul versus like what's in your head that you think you're supposed to want or desire, or what's been programmed into you and you're just responding to the programming. There's a longing or there's a yearning. It's almost like you're missing something that already exists because it's always been true for you somewhere at your core, right?
Yep.
And for her, though, she was feeling like longing had an essence of like lack to it, like waiting around, almost like a powerlessness. How do you feel about that?
I actually look at longing and yearning this way, and I look at suffering the same way. I don't think that there's lack to it all. I think it's what moves you and engages you. It's kind of like this. To me, happiness and meaning is almost like a hamster wheel, right? When you're on the wheel and you're running, happiness occurs. You generate it. When you stop running, it stops being generated. And longing, yearning, is what makes you get on the hamster wheel. That's what we're designed to do. If we had none of that, right, we wouldn't be motivated to do anything. And here's the other thing I'll say about that. To me, I also go like this. I think yearning and longing is a very spiritual thing. Here's why. Because I actually subscribe, I think, to what you were saying. I think that the greatest yearning, and I think this is the reason why, it's funny we're talking about Viktor Frankl, man's search for meaning. He essentially is saying we are yearning for meaning in our lives. We have a drive for power, a drive for pleasure, and a drive for meaning. And the drive for power is fleeting. We don't get to really share that. The drive for pleasure is also fleeting. We don't really get to share that, but meaning has legacy in it. Meaning means we make a difference. And so I think we yearn and long so that we can create something greater than ourselves. I think that's the whole reason we are on the planet, essentially to first learn, then to teach, then to love, those three things. And we do that through meaning. So for example, to make this more tangible for everybody, I'll give you guys, I'll get a little vulnerable and tell you a little bit about how I use this stuff, this longing and this yearning. So I went through this process, went through a divorce with a woman I loved, also fell in love. And so I was in a situation, just to make a long story short, where I was in a marriage, fell in love with another woman, still loved my wife, but I was in two places. I realized that people will be like, how can that happen? Trust me, maybe one day you'll experience it. It's miserable. It's miserable. But here's what happened. So out of this great suffering came me saying, I want to do something meaningful out of this. I want to create meaning out of it. And I had this yearning and this longing to, since I was little, really to teach. And so this to me was part of getting me to what I really should be teaching and what I really wanted to teach. And so I decided I doubled down on honesty and kindness and generosity and sort of wrote out an honor code for myself. And it's a lot of what I teach now and the people I work with, how to construct your own honor code, not one co-opted from, Eckhart Tolle, or one co-opted from Catholicism, or one co-opted from Byron Katie, one that you build, your own honor code. And out of this yearning to sort of define and, create something that is mine, that I could carry out and create meaning in the world, I, of course, am a human. So I am depressed and I'm sad at times. And I was going through a really rough time when I first came out to LA. So what I did is I picked up my honor code and I looked at it, and I basically was like kindness, generosity. So I said, you know what, generosity. I want to tap into that right now. So I just went out, got $200 from the ATM. Of course, it comes in 20. So then I had to walk to the Exxon Mobil station and get fives and this and that. And I just walked around Santa Monica, because everywhere you look, there's someone who with their hand out. And it wasn't necessarily about giving money. Actually, it was for me. I would give them money. Then I'd sit and talk to them and just connect with them and just be like, how are things? Oh, things are good. This and that. Just talking to, see all kinds of crazy stuff. By the time I spent 3 hours out of Santa Monica walking around, by the time I came back, my depression, my feeling of being disconnected was gone. My feeling of longing in a sense, yearning in a sense, was gone for a time. I was able to generate it through making meaning through my honor code. So to me, these things they're there for us almost as a guide to the good life in a sense, the way that we are able to weather the storm. They act as both the anchor and the lighthouse in the storms of our lives. And so without that yearning and that longing, we would just become complacent and indifferent. When we were sad, or we would become, completely a lack of motivation or the ability to achieve anything when we had drive. And so to me, it's there to move us forward. Without it, we're no one. Without it, we can't make a difference in the world.
Yeah, I love that so much.
So it's a big, long example of like why I think longing is so important and why I think suffering is so important.
And I love too that you've also spoken to how all of these are all states. Like they're emotions. Some of them are emotions, but some of them are states, right? Like happy isn't meant to last. It's not actually sustainable, right? Like you're going to have bursts of happy. You're going to have bursts of sad, depressed, anger, these things. None of them are really permanent. Like they're all fleeting. So, but we're not just at the whim of whenever they want to stop by. You can head out and generate it whenever you want to. And I love the example. Something that I learned from my mom a super long time ago is if you're having a bad day, just go do something nice for someone else, but don't tell anyone you did it. Right. So like you sharing that here in the context, like that makes sense. Like I'm sure you didn't write a post on social media that was like, hey, everyone, guess what I did today?
Yep. I tell the story now, 2 years later.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, I love that. I think that's exactly right. And I think that's ultimately what we are yearning for. I mean, you can look at it through any lens you want, look at it through the God lens, look at it through the universe lens, look at it through the evolutionary biology lens. However you want to look at it, we humans are built for connection. We are social creatures. We are not islands unto ourselves. We are here by our nature to help others. When we help others, we are helping ourselves. Yeah. So we are being selfless to be selfish. And that's the way, versus the other way, be selfish to be selfish. No, be selfless to be selfish. Yeah. And you get it all coming back to you, which is what your mom, said. To me, that's ultimately what we're driving to do. And more importantly, right, there's bigger things than that. You doing this podcast is about you and your meaning and what you want to put out into the world as a legacy, which I find funny, right? I'll ask you this. What do you think about the term legacy? Because some people hear legacy and they hear ego. I hear legacy and I go, legacy is about what you leave behind for others that you'll never see. You and I were talking about my tattoos, which I have relinquim amor that goes across my back here. I can't see it. Relinquim amor means leave your love, which essentially means it's a legacy statement for me. It means I am on this planet to do something meaningful for other people that I will never get to see or benefit from. And that's the whole reason I'm here. That's why it's on my back.
Yeah, that's so interesting because the term legacy, I'm kind of neutral to it. I never really think about it. And when I hear it, it sounds almost archaic. Or what I think of, I just what I'm picturing in my brain is something like King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. I don't know why, that's the mental link for me. But the idea of leaving something behind. What I love about Wild Soul Movement is it is a movement. When I was creating this, what was really important, because I met you back in my fitness days when I was in grad school for exercise science. That one semester, I didn't even do the whole semester at GW in DC. I've said to Jilly, I think I just had to go to grad school so I could meet you guys. I had to take a detour just so I could meet two of my favorite friends of all time. But, taking a quick break in the show here, I'm literally so excited about these Unconsume Yourself workshops we have going on this week. I wanted to pop back in and tell you a little more specifically about what we'll be covering. So here's what you'll learn if you tune in for any of the workshops this week. First, we're going to talk about priorities and the paradox of choice. So basically why you struggle to be consistent with habits and practices that you know work for you and how to get in the groove with holy consistency instead. We're going to cover tangible ways to measure progress and results. So basically why tracking and measuring your progress exponentially improves your results, even though I know it sounds so unsexy and boring. This also helps you to know how it's enough when it comes to self-improvement, spirituality, and doing the work, or when it's just time for a break and to relax and restore yourself. We'll talk about focusing on what makes the biggest difference and how to simplify your life, purify your energy, and stay unconsumed. And then we're also going to get into self-trust, because self-trust is the thing that makes all of this accessible, sustainable, and much, much easier. So one of our workshops is actually tonight, if you're listening in real time, Monday, November 27th at 5 p.m. Pacific. Our next one is Wednesday, November 29th at 9 a.m. Pacific, Friday, December 1st at noon Pacific, and then Saturday, December 2nd at 7 a.m. Pacific time. I'm going to get up early so that some of you who live in all the different time zones can get on this workshop and be there live with me. So again, if you want to join us for these powerful keys to less stress, more balance, and deeply enjoying life no matter what's going on in your world, you can register at wildsoulmovement.com/UCY workshops. And we'll also put a link to that in the show notes, which again is at untameyourself.com/episode-213. Now back to the show. Part of what felt so important to me about creating a brand around an idea and a movement and not me was I was exhausted of having it be about me. And I think this goes to the legacy thing, right? And even in, as any kind of leader or an author, like you've written books, the word author is in authority. Like people are going to, whether you want them to or not, put you on a pedestal. And I'm constantly trying to take myself off the pedestal and put the power back in the hands of the people, right? Like just the same way people want to project their crap onto you, they want to project their power onto you. And they want to be like, you're so amazing. And I'm like, cool. You must also be amazing in all the ways that you think I'm amazing, or you wouldn't be able to recognize that. So legacy is an interesting term. What drives me more than that is the idea of ripple effects.
Yep.
that is like all the ways in which what I do here, the conversations we have on the podcast, and what's cool about social media is I do get to hear. People send me messages on Instagram, on Facebook all the time. This conversation changed my life, or I shared it with someone. Or in the last week, I've gotten 2 messages from former clients sharing with me about their kids using what I taught them, that they have turned around and taught their kids who are only between the ages of 8 and 12.
See, now that's badass.
Yeah, right? That excites me more than anything.
That's amazing. And to me, it's funny you said ripple, because when I think of legacy, that's how I see it. A stone dropping in a pond, you create, this is your life. You know, by the time you sink to the bottom of that lake, you're dead. And so you have the time from where you hit the water to the time where your stone sinks to the bottom. And those ripples can either be a storm that makes people's lives harder and messier and destructive, or they could be waves that lift people and bring them to shore and inspire them. And so to me, that's what legacy is. So Wild Soul Movement, your legacy from the way I see it is your ripples. Absolutely. That's exactly what I mean. But it's always great for me to have these kind of conversations, because maybe legacy isn't the right word, you know, but I think whatever you want to call it, we have a need. I think all humans have a need and a desire and a want for that. And actually, I'll say something else that you made me think of. You know what I've been working on like really hard? Speaking of the authority figure, I used to be a guy who just, you know, observed. And I love that about myself. Didn't say much. I feel like I can't shut the hell up nowadays. I swear to God, I feel like,
funny.
Liz.
I recently refollowed you on Instagram. I'm like, damn, Jade writes some long ass posts.
Yeah, I'm just like, literally, I feel like I can't shut up. And so speaking of the authority thing, like part of it is I'm starting to learn to be I want to be in the rhythm of, you know, being taught, because to me it's learn, teach, love, and I feel like as I've progressed, I've gotten out of the learn a little bit, and I've realized that has slowed my ability to be a good teacher, and also hindered what I'm actually sharing. And so I'm actually working on sort of listening more. Actually, and what's really interesting about the way I write on Instagram, Instagram is funny because it's become, when I first started doing Instagram, I was like, I have to write every day. So I don't know, you guys probably don't know my story, but I came from the dumb jock story. It's a story I was telling myself. And in order to convince myself I could be a writer, I was like, well, what do writers do? What do authors do? Well, they read and they write all the time. And so for the last 12 years or so, I try to write something every single morning, right? I need to write something. And Instagram became my avenue to do that. And so because they limit you a little bit, you have to be pretty concise. You know, I'm sure Elizabeth's like, you're not that damn concise, dude.
It's not like Twitter concise, but it's not like you're writing.
But it's not like a blog post either. You know, so it's been very useful for me to talk less, actually, even though I'm still talking a lot.
I love that.
Because otherwise I'd write like a blog post that's like 10 pages. And so it's helping me be more concise in my writing.
And I do that. And I'm with you because I feel like in terms of self-expression, and this kind of comes back to vulnerability, because there is a vulnerability to sharing that daily writing. There's a difference between doing that in a journal or having all these files in your Evernote or in your Google Docs that never see the light of day versus I'm putting this up. It's subject to other people's reflections, unsolicited feedback, opinions, whether they like it or whether they don't like it. Thumbs up, thumbs down. And
Elizabeth, I think that is the most important thing we can do as humans and creators, what you just said. You tapped into something that I'm like, I feel like anyone listening to this who's trying to do what you and I do as a creator, to me, nothing is real until it's shared. Happiness is not real until it's shared. That's from, McCandless, the McCandless story, Into the Wild. Happiness not real unless shared. I think creation's not real unless shared. And so to me, you have got to put that stuff out there. Otherwise, your brain goes, you know what, Elizabeth, you're full of shit. You're not a real creator. You're not really putting it out. And it goes, you know what, Jade, you're full of shit. You're not a real creator. That's the difference between a critic and a creator. A creator says, you know what, here it is. Here it is, world. Do with it as you will. Hate it, love it. Both are not important to me. The fact that what's important is that it is out there.
Yeah. There's I am a huge fan of Elizabeth Gilbert. I've always been a fan of her since her first book, Eat, Pray, Love, came out. And I'm trying to remember whose podcast, her and Glennon Doyle Melton. You know what? I think she might have been sitting in for Rob Bell on his podcast, and she was interviewing Glennon Doyle. That also might not be correct. I remember where I was. I was driving in Mallorca by myself in March listening to it. Either way. And they were talking about when you put your stuff out there that you have to let it go. It's actually not yours anymore once you share it. And I loved that so much because Glennon Doyle, who has like millions of followers, was talking about how she can't, it's not about checking how many people liked it, how many people made comments or whatever. It was more about getting it out there in the world.
I couldn't agree more. And it's funny, something was weird was going on with Skype as I was watching you talk. My screen was going like this. So I'm like tracking, following you around. So
funny. And actually, I don't have you on video anymore.
Oh, you don't? Okay. Let's see.
You're back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I hit something. I had something pop up on my thing, and I hit it, and then you like went off, started floating around my screen. Okay. But anyway, to me, I speaking of meaning again, the yearning, the longing for meaning, and what you not you, Elizabeth, but us as people, as humans, I feel like we have to share that in some way. Here's a tangible example of it. Why do so many people feel the drive to have children? It is that. It is the need to put their energetic ripples into the world. It's the easiest way for most people to create meaning. And, like a child, you definitely hit publish on that. You know what I mean? It's out in the world now. You have to deal with it, right? It's yours. You have to take responsibility for it. And to me, that is the most important thing we can do as humans. It's the principle of engagement. You have to engage. And I would say that people who are hiding all the time, hiding their work, hiding all that stuff, they're the ones that I feel like are where your friend talked about longing being like from a place of lack. Yeah. I feel like, longing and yearning, when you're engaged, they're heading somewhere. Longing and yearning, when you're not engaged, are certainly a pit of despair in a sense. You know what I mean? So like that could either be driving you forward, or it could be pulling you backwards. And it's all about your ability to share yourself with the world. This goes into a whole conversation about why honesty and lying and bullshitting and, putting on airs and publishing only certain things on social media and all that kind of stuff can, I think, for some people be a problem, because we do live in these sort of bubbles where no one wants to show who they really are.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I am a person who really prides myself on people, when I meet people in real life, receiving the reflection, oh my God, you are exactly as you are on the internet. And I feel like the day I stop hearing that on a consistent basis is the day I need to shut it all down. And
you really are. You absolutely are. Yeah, you are.
And so I feel irritated when people talk about everyone's just posting their highlight reel, everyone's whatever. Because I'm like, you guys, I'm not. But again, it's not about me. But sometimes my ego wants to go, I don't do that. We can just let actions speak louder than words. I don't need to justify myself. But I think what you're saying around the sharing, and this is funny because I had made myself, and I take little notes while we're talking. When we were talking about legacy, I had written down children because I wanted to circle back to that with you. Yeah. And so let me check because I'm not sure. I know in the past you've been in the no kids camp. Are you still like no kids for sure, or are you open?
I am. I've always been in a position where I'm like, look, I'll never say never because with age and wisdom comes, you just know, don't ever say never. Yeah. However, I would be literally shocked. I would fall off my chair shocked if I ever decided to want children. Yeah. That would take a lot. But I do have, like, I would love to meet a woman single who's been through a marriage, who's been through some life, who has some wisdom. And actually, I'll say this because I talk to so many women who are like, well, I'm in my 40s, I'm in my 50s even. I'm in my 30s and I've got kids and I went through a divorce and no man's going to want to be with me or whatever. There's this weird thing around that. That's actually who I would be looking for, a partner like that. I would love to be a stepdad, I think. I think that would be something right inside my skill set. I have no desire for my own. And I've also thought about, as I've done really well in business and stuff, I've thought about, as I get older, if I don't have, someone in my life, I would probably want to do foster care or something like that. Like, I definitely love being the coach and teacher. I just have there doesn't need to be another Jade. My view on that is that there are a ton of kids in the world who need to be loved right now. It's already an overpopulated world, and I don't need my seed around. Like, there's nothing so great about me that requires someone with my genes floating around. That's the way I look at it. So I've always found that weird. I'm like, I think people are like, I'm just not that damn special in that regard. Number one. Number two, there's a hell of a lot of kids that are on the planet right now. Number three, we're overpopulated. So yeah, that's my take on it. So anyone who's single, cool chick who's got, kids who, that's who I'd be looking for.
Oh man,
you know what I mean?
You better watch your email inbox. We have a lot of responsive people
way,
on this podcast.
Really, yeah, I know. And
Jade's not like, holler at me.
Well, by the way, and I think you know this, Elizabeth, like relationships, just as I've gotten older, that's another interesting thing. Romance just is not nearly as important to me as it once was. I all the fairy tales out of it. I love, being with my lover and being close. And like, I love that. To me, it's one of the most spiritual experiences on earth. So I love that. But yeah, it's funny. I also am, in the romantic realm, I'm completely different than I was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Definitely completely different.
It's super fascinating. And I'm so excited to get to ask you about this because I don't know that I've ever asked a man this perspective. So as a woman, and I'm literally 100% with you, down to that I've thought about maybe it'd be cool to be a stepmom. But as a woman, when you share that you don't want to have children, a lot of people will say, oh, you'll change your mind, or, but you'd be such a good mom. It's almost like this life-defining thing / box you need to check to actually be a woman.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, and again, anyone listening, I always like to put this out there because I personally am in the not interested in having children camp, but also never say never because you never know. I said I was never going to get a tattoo, and I have 2 of them now. Yep. So, for people listening, you know me. I don't judge other people's choices. I don't think it's stupid to have children. I don't think it's better to not want children, whatever. And I also know how many people have difficulty conceiving and all of these things. So I want to be sensitive to that. And I'm curious, as a man, when you share that perspective, if there is any, what is the pushback that you get from people?
Similar, same exact, things that they say. Some of my closest friends, oh, you're going to want kids when, oh, you don't know what you're missing and all this kind of stuff. And I take it very much like you do. I basically go, what people really mean when they give you advice is the advice that they feel it would work for them. And so I filter it through that. And I just essentially go, my babies, my books, my creations,
Totally.
that stuff is, your creation, your legacy, your ripples are coming from Wild Soul Movement and the fact that you're a creator and a teacher. So some people are, and I love this, by the way, my parents did this. They were all about their kids, and I'm a beneficiary of someone saying, my legacy will be touching this small group of people. Some people are cut out for that. Other people are cut out for teaching larger groups of people. I think you're one of those. And you may decide one day, oh, maybe I will see about that. But that's the pushback I get. But I will tell you this. I'm dating a girl right now who I love her. She's amazing. She wants marriage and kids. That's not going to happen for me. I'm just like, you're going to have, she's younger than me. So it has consequences, right? Because some people just really want that stuff. But like, to me, it's just not important. You have to be sort of clear on that and understand that for her, that's where her meaning is going to be made. She'll be an amazing mom. So would you, by the way. So would I be an amazing dad. But it's where we choose to put our efforts. To me, it's just that's the way most people are able to make their meaning in the world. That's most people's legacy is going to be their children. Your legacy is going to be your creative work. And some people, their legacy is both. So I don't want people to hear, oh, well, I have kids and I'm also, doing creative works and things like that. Of course, you can do both. I just think for me, my creative works will be that. And that fulfills me probably the way that other people's children will. I've heard, by the way, that it's selfish not to have kids. I see it both ways. I see it as selfish to have kids. I mean, obviously, we don't need any more people on the planet. And, there's a lot of assholes in the world. How are you going to guarantee your kid's not going to be an asshole? I'm just saying, you know what I mean? You got no real control over that. So I see it as selfish on both ways, I guess, but it's really just a personal choice. I will say this, though. See what you think about this, and we'll see what your listeners think about this. I do a lot of research in romantic attraction and that whole realm. And what's interesting is when you look at the research, we do evaluate our potential partners, whether we want children or not. According to the research, we evaluate them based on how we think they will be as a mother or a father, whether we want children or not. You're going to be evaluating your man based on would he be a good dad. That's why we watch them when they're around animals and when they're around servers and whether they let people merge into traffic. And we evaluate people's kindness on that because that's kind of built into us a little bit. So we do evaluate people on that level. So I think that's important. At least the science says that, which doesn't mean it's true. I'm actually thinking, I'm just asking, well, do you think that's true? And do you think there's some truth to that? It resonates true for me.
What I'm always interested is looking at things from the perspective of, is this true or is this culture working through me?
Exactly.
And that's not a phrase that I made up myself. I got that. This year I've studied culture at large, systems of oppression and, all these other things and how they work through us. And so I've like you, I geek out on a lot of stuff and I've done a lot of research this year. So I'm always super interested. Science is one thing, spirituality is one thing, inner wisdom. There's some things that I just know and I have no idea how I know it. And I know it's like the absolute truth for me. And then there's how much of this is culture just working through me versus biology. My answer is I don't know, but I for sure evaluate people on how they treat others. Yeah. Because to me, that just speaks, whether it's because I'm sizing her up to be my baby daddy, or it just is in my value system. Yep. How people treat other human beings says a lot about who they are as a person, not just their character, but how they're doing on the inside. Because if someone in their outer life is treating others like shit, they're not doing okay in their inner world, And so that's a red flag for me. Doesn't mean I need to write someone off, but it's just like important to know.
Agreed.
Yeah. I'm really curious. How would you define power? You mentioned power earlier. This is something we talk about. One of the topics in Wild Soul Movement is love and creation. And that's where I put power.
Yep.
And I always love asking people at my workshops, what's your definition of power? What is yours?
It's very simply the ability to set an intention and achieve it. To me, that's where your power lies. It's basically to, we have. I think here's my thing. With God and all this kind of stuff and creators, I think we're God. I think humans created God versus the other way around. And so to me, when you're exercising your creative power or power in general, it's the ability to create your confidence and your ability to set an intention and create that outcome no matter what. So powerful people are that way in my mind because you trust. They first have built trust that they will do and take on, and you actually can trust that they will do and take on. In other words, they're people who are like, I am confident enough to set an intention and go and achieve it. And you mentioned this, and this is true in science as well. Your brain is watching you all the time and judging you the way you judge other people. Matter of fact, it does it way more harshly. And so the ability for you to feel powerful, to be powerful, is first the ability for you to say, there's something that might be a little bit scary, a little bit out of reach, something that is not yet a reality, and I have the courage to take it on and actually achieve it. And power is built through that process. It's one of the reasons why, if I was a dad, I would get my kids involved with sport. And the reason why is because sport, to me, is a very spiritual process that teaches this idea of power. It essentially says you can work your ass off, you can play the best game, you can prepare, you can do everything right, you step out onto the field, that's the courage part. And then life happens and you're going to get the shit kicked out of you. Doesn't matter. You could be the best in the world, play your best game, prepare the best, and still get beat. Power comes from getting up again and again and again. So power has resilience in it. Power has resolve in it. Power has engagement in it. And, all those things of power. Power does have vulnerability in it. That's why I think, it's the ability to sort of stand in that and say, here I am. I will take this on, and I have every confidence that I can achieve. I also have every confidence that if I fail, I can handle that too.
Yeah, I love that so much. This is a powerful point to end the interview on, pun intended. Yeah. Jade, I missed you so much. I really love you. You're one of my favorite human beings.
I love you too, my dear.
So obviously people can follow you on Instagram for your long ass, but I'm just teasing you. But seriously, and also they're great. So follow Jade on Instagram. We're going to put all the links in the show notes. We gave you the link to that in the intro, but also website, jadeteta.com. Yeah?
Mm-hmm, yep.
And if you're someone who loves like fitness and nutrition and all that, Jade is also super brilliant, co-founder of a company called Metabolic Effect, which I've loved for many years. And so, but everything, you can get to everything else from jadeteta.com, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And where I spend most of my time right now is Instagram, writing my big ass boo-boo long posts.
Listen, it's my favorite too. And I love Insta stories. I feel like Insta stories is where we all just get to actually be ourselves.
Exactly. You definitely see my goofy ass sense of humor on Insta stories.
It's ridiculous.
I've had several people say, you're so inappropriate, I'm unfollowing. And I'm like, okay.
Great. Not for you.
I can't believe you're so inappropriate. I'm like, yeah, neither can I. Neither can anyone who knows me. And you join the club.
You and me both, friend.
Exactly.
I love that. I love when someone wants to give some feedback that they think is like harsh or critical, and my answer is, I know, right?
Exactly. I'm like, honestly, it's kind of on purpose. So thanks, but no thanks.
I don't know what to tell you. Great. All right, friends. I will see you later. Thank you so much. This was so great. We'll have to have you back because there's literally 17 more questions I could have asked you, but I appreciate your perspective, and I really appreciate the way you model the openness you talked about. You're so curious. You're so open. You're always wanting the other person's perspective as well. And I really do think it says a lot about like how you do life and how you are as a human. So appreciate
I love you, dude.
Mucho. All right. I'll see you later.
Later.
People are going to trigger you. Experiences are going to trigger you. There's going to be somebody that you don't like because they reminded you of your brother, your uncle, your first grade teacher, whatever. And you're going to project your stuff onto them. All of that's fine as long as you're taking responsibility for it and not making it about them.